Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
Good morning. It's Thursday, March 26, and this is the Brussels Playbook podcast. The vibe in town today is pleading, with UN and EU officials meeting to discuss the war in Sudan, which could result in a refugee crisis in Europe. And this comes just as the EU Parliament votes to get tougher on migration. Also on the podcast, I spoke with Cyprus Europe Minister Marilena Raouna, and we talk about her plans for the rest of the Cypriot presidency. Plus, is this the end of abbreviations in Brussels? RIP. With me today is one of our policy editors, Sarah Wheaton. Hey, Sarah, I heard you went to a cheese reception last night.
I'm the agriculture and food editor, and that means lobbying happens over a buffet. And the European Dairy Association had a cheese buffet with lactose-laden delectables from across the continent.
What's your favorite cheese?
Comté.
Oof, that was fast.
That's probably bias for my job, so sorry, everybody else.
I'm partial to an ashy, rindy, delicious one or something very blue and funky. Anyway, no more cheese talk. Before we get started today, we're going to have a couple of updates for our regular listeners. Yesterday, the winner of the EU Customs Agency race was announced. This is the city that gets to be the host of this new agency, and it was Lille.
Lille. All right.
I was hoping Liège, the hometown hero, would come through, but no, it was Lille.
Because Belgium doesn't have enough EU institutions already.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Right, there's another update. The EU-US trade deal, that's getting voted in the full European Parliament today. All MEPs are going to be voting on it. And reporters from our trade team and our European Parliament reporter, they reckon it's pretty much set to pass.
Yep, and they're even reporting that three-way talks with the EU governments, the European Parliament, and the Commission will start as soon as April 13th.
I think that's a scoopy poopy. Not too shabby.
Not too shabby.
Our first story today, it's a tough one, Sarah. It's about the crisis in Sudan. Senior officials from the UN and the EU, they're meeting in Brussels starting from this morning to discuss the conflict. And they're going to hear from the European Commissioner for Crisis Management, Haja Labib, among others. And this is a really significant issue that we're not hearing too much about at the moment, Sarah.
Yeah, I had to remind myself with everything else going on, but this conflict has been going on since 2023, and it's a struggle between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary group. The RSF, the latter group, has been accused by UN experts of ethnic massacres, sexual violence. Both sides have been accused of carrying out war crimes.
Yeah, and yesterday, I sat down with 7 officials from 7 different UN agencies, including the UNHCR, UNICEF, the WHO, and the International Organization for Migration, to discuss the conflict. They were in town ahead of this meeting. And the things that they were telling me were really grim, Sarah. They're talking about over 30 million people who require humanitarian assistance. At the peak of the crisis, 12 million people had been displaced. Now that number is around the 9 million mark, but it truly is a pretty horrific crisis. And unfortunately, the UN was super reliant on funding from the US, but as a result of the Trump administration's cuts to funding, they are severely really running out of cash here.
And they also brought up the refugee issue and said, this is actually an opportunity to learn from what happened in Syria. They're saying the phase that we're in right now in Sudan is similar to the way Syria looked in 2011 before we saw many people fleeing. They're saying if we act to stabilize the region now, help develop a route to peace, we could potentially avoid the displacement that happened on par with what happened in Syria.
Yeah, and the main thing that I took away from this meeting yesterday is that what they need is money and they need attention. This was something that was kind of a repeat message, that the Sudan crisis is the worst crisis that we have had in this year. And they said, nonetheless, people just don't seem to be talking about what's happening in Sudan. Some of the reasons for that they gave is it's a confusing crisis. We don't really know what's going on. But the flip side of that is that without that attention, they're not getting the level of funding they need, and they really need that funding to ensure that people remain safe. And they talked about the impact on women, the fact that millions of women are looking at really dire circumstances, and also at men, at children who are being forced into becoming child soldiers. So it really is very, very grim. And there was this sense that I had yesterday that they were exasperated by the lack of attention.
Well, yeah, I mean, so then it's no surprise that there are concerns that obviously people want to get out of that situation and head to safer havens like Europe. And that's really the kind of political argument that they're trying to make in Europe, where people might not otherwise care, frankly.
Yeah, and what they're saying, we're not seeing the same level of movement as we saw at the peak of that Syria crisis, but that's largely because people are being displaced within Sudan and moving within the region. But the warning was, if we don't resolve this crisis, if there isn't some sort of diplomatic solution, some pressure to stop this crisis, then it could turn into something significantly worse that would push people outside of that region. But that actually brings us to something that's happening in the European Parliament today, which is that there is this vote on the EU returns regulation, which I think kind of is the flip side of this conversation. On the one hand, what the UN is saying, let's solve this crisis in Sudan before it becomes an EU problem. The European Parliament is now dealing with what happens when it becomes an EU problem.
Yeah, so this legislation is saying, look, it needs to be easier to kick out people who we've already decided are not allowed to be in the European Union. And so that would include the possibility of sending rejected asylum seekers to deportation centers outside of the EU. Could also mean expanding detention and entry bans for those who refuse to leave.
Yeah, so there is this vote in the European Parliament this morning, and that's a vote that has been put up by left-leaning groups trying to kind of soften the blow of this legislation. That is not expected to pass, and then almost immediately this is going to go to these three-way talks between the European Parliament, Commission and Council, basically also today. So it is, it's a migration day, that's for sure. Sarah, next up, we've got, again, something a little bit different from the podcast. We're still experimenting. We're little baby podcasters. I actually sat down with the Cyprus Europe Minister last night, Marilena Raouna. And so she met me in the Parliament's Warren-like structures in a meeting room where we had some peanut M&Ms and talked about what they've been doing, the Cypriots, in their presidency. Now, just as a reminder to our listeners, basically what happens is that every 6 months, there is a new country that takes the helm of the Council of the EU. And essentially what they do is they are the brokers of these negotiations around all EU legislation that's being negotiated. And it's now Cyprus. And of course, it has never been a more pertinent time for Cyprus to be at that helm, Sarah.
Yeah, after all, Cyprus has been the only EU country that has been affected by the American-Israeli war on Iran.
Yeah, there was that incident early on in the war where a drone struck a UK airbase that's on the Cypriot island. And the other things that we talked about, so we talked about the fact that today, Minister Raouna is going to be meeting with the Office of the President of the Council, and they're going to be setting the agenda for the informal meeting of EU leaders that's going to be happening in April in Cyprus. And so we talk about that, what's going to be on the agenda, and also how Cyprus plans to ensure that these leaders are safe. Minister Raouna, you've got a pretty unique position in Cyprus. And I think it has been uniquely challenging this presidency because while you're trying to hold meetings in Cyprus, there are Iranian drones being directed at British air bases on the island of Cyprus. What is that like being in Cyprus and being potentially in the line of fire?
Mm-hmm. So every presidency, as you know, Zoya, has one or more crises. This is it for us. Obviously, we were a member state that was directly affected. We had this one single isolated incident that took place at the British base of Akrotiri. It was a drone. It caused minimal damage, no casualties. What I would like to stress is that we continue delivering on the presidency. No meetings have been cancelled. And as of April to June, all meetings in Cyprus will take place as planned, including, of course, the informal European Council that will take place on the 23rd and 24th of April.
This is the European Council. That's the 27 EU heads of state and government who are as expected. Is it possible to protect those 27 EU heads of state and government in light of what's happening in the region?
Absolutely. There is no security risk that right now we see a security situation across the region and across Europe. There is, as I said, full conditions of normality in Cyprus, full conditions of security. All measures will be taken as all presidencies have done. Also, we are absolutely prepared at all levels.
Minister, it's almost the halfway point of your presidency. What has surprised you the most?
What has surprised me the most? I would say not that it has surprised me, but I now see it really firsthand. The European Union, when under pressure, when there is a crisis, we know how to deliver. For example, let's take simplification. Let's take competitiveness.
We've been talking about this for months. It's this idea that Europe needs to be competitive against the US, against China, against other forces.
And it's all, Zoya, under, I think, the umbrella of how do we make the European Union more autonomous, right? It's not just security and defense. It's also competitiveness and trade and energy. Finally, making an energy union a reality. It's all of those things. Over the last 2-3 years, there's been such incredible progress when it comes to security and defense. The kind of investment that has gone in security and defense. And we're seeing now we're delivering as presidency on the SAFE plans for member states. This kind of progress would have been unthinkable a few years back.
SAFE is this loans that have been given out by the EU for countries to be able to beef up their defences. And we just saw the latest kind of round of disbursement yesterday. So
SAFE, and also things like military mobility, right? That is now at the council, all very important. And then competitiveness. It covers simplification. And as presidency, we now have on our table an advancing work on 7 omnibus packages. That's 21 legislative proposals that we are expediting in the council. And we very recently had an agreement on the digital omnibus, on the AI, on the feed and food safety. But it's also things like our trade policy, right? Really building up this network of trade agreements. We had the FTA with India. That's such a historic agreement.
That's a free trade agreement.
A free trade agreement.
India.
We had Mercosur. It was one of the first things we delivered on as presidency. Across the board, I think there is a lot of appetite to deliver despite the challenges. And we need to remember that as a European Union, we are delivering. Our model, the European model, is attractive and it delivers.
Minister Raouna, I recently had the pleasure of having a Cypriot coffee, which is my favourite coffee. But I wanted to ask you about your coffee habit. You're in this presidency hot seat. You're probably having quite a few. How many coffees do you drink in a day these days?
2-3 coffees a day, and usually before lunch. I am kind of the face of the presidency, but there is such an incredible team behind the Cyprus presidency here in Brussels and in Nicosia, very dedicated people that are working very hard to deliver on our European agenda.
Having 6 coffees a day.
It's possible. It's possible.
For our last story, we have some news on a tradition that is much loathed and beloved in Brussels, the acronym. So our colleague Mari Eccles, who covers lobbying, has noticed a trend where groups are rebranding from long, weird, technical-sounding acronyms to things that are at least slightly more catchy. So ETRMA...
Or just rolls off the tongue. Sarah, go on ETRMA.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly the problem. It's now Tires Europe.
Well, that is better, to be fair. I mean, I'd rather be Tires Europe than ETRMA. I'm tired Europe. What else?
Abiome is now Bioenergy Europe.
I still don't really know what that is.
It's bioenergy, Zoya.
Well, my favorite acronym is GAC, or maybe it's FAC.
Well, I actually love one called Europatat.
What is that?
It's the European Potato Trade Association.
I guess it's right there in the title. There's a hint. The GAC is the General Affairs Council and the FAC is the Foreign Affairs Council. But if you say it fast enough, it sounds like a rude word.
Fact you, Zoya.
It's just the facts of life, Sarah.
Fact check, true.
Right. Listeners, we're intrigued. What do you like? Do you have a favorite convoluted EU acronym or just like a fun one that sounds like a curse? Let us know. Our WhatsApp number is in the show notes. Before we go, Sarah, what's on tomorrow's EU Confidential?
Well, it's actually something you touched on the other day. Denmark was an example of the epically poor showings we've been seeing from Europe's socialist parties. So we're going to look at what's ailing the center left.
Oh, and how to make meta better.
She could use that advice.
Right, that's it from us. Before we go, quick birthday shout out to Commissioner Stéphane Séjourné.
Bon anniversaire.
Ooh, I like that. Hope he gets a cake. I'd like a mud cake for mine, so just for your reference. Folks, if you enjoy the pod, I just have a little favor, a teeny tiny favor to ask you. Please do tell another person about the show. Just one. Maybe rate us, maybe review us. Uh-oh, that's three favors. Sarah, I'm...
Lies.
bracket creep.
Lies from the media.
Mainstream media, that's what we do. Folks, it's been great having you with us today.
I will see you tomorrow.
I'm going to take the day off.
You've earned it.